First and foremost, how does the Catholic Church say the world began versus how does science say the world began? For starters, there are two creation accounts in the Catholic religion. The Catholic Church considers them to be myths. Myths are stories that require the reader to interpret the message behind it. The first creation account is when God spent 6 days creating parts of our world and then he rested on the seventh. The second creation account is the story of Adam and Eve. This is when God gave Adam animals and a garden, and then Eve was created from Adam's rib. Eve was then tempted by a serpent to eat a fruit in hopes that it would make her as powerful as God. Adam also took a bite of the fruit, and they both became ashamed and hid from their God. One theory of science for how the world became is quite different. Science's theory is called the Big Bang Theory. The Big Bang Theory states that the universe started with what scientists call a small singularity. And over the span of 13.8 billion years, it inflated to the immensity it is today. Although these perspectives are different, the Big Bang Theory does not account for how a small singularity came to be. This is where God comes in. God created an ordered world on purpose. 6 days may not necessarily mean the typical 24-hour day. Adam and Eve could have been cells. There is a world of possibility that we will explore in this video.
So, Mr. West, do you believe that science and religion work in unison?
Yes. And you want me to kind of like elaborate?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, please.
So science is like the study of what we observe with our senses, what we can feel, touch, smell, etc. And it kind of explains everything that we see and everything that we experience in our world. Faith and religion is kind of to explain everything beyond our senses. So most people, they point to beginning of time as something that science can't observe because no one was there to observe it, to calculate or make observations on it. So faith helps explain that. So science explains our world, helps us understand our world, but of course it can't explain the origins of the universe, so that's what faith is for. And science kind of helps support religion. Of course, religion embodies everything that is creation because God created all things.
Okay, cool. Second question. Why should scientists care about religion?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think scientists should care because it answers questions to things that we cannot answer with human reasoning. Such as how large is the universe? I mean, an infinite amount of space is something that we can't fathom with the human mind. There's something that there's just a limitation to human thought, and religion kind of helps explain some of those things. So if you really want to be a true scientist, I think that you'd have to embody some practices of religion because what we can observe is limited, what we can feel, see, smell, all that stuff is limited. So we need something to help us answer those questions that we cannot answer with our human limitations.
Okay. Third question. How do you believe that the world came to be?
Obviously it was intelligent design, meaning God created the world. Now this is what kind of like really separates a lot of people on how it was created. Some people say the Big Bang, some people say the story of creation that's in the Bible is verbatim what happened. I like to think that whatever science kind of discovers and theorizes based on astrophysics and anything else that is involved with it, that of course, you know, that what we observe can be calculated with, or measured with science, so that can support the theory of, you know, how the universe was created or dispersed. But of course, everything has to have an origin, and that is intelligent design.
And for the last question, do you think that the story of Adam and Eve has a scientific meaning, or do you believe it's just a story?
I think, you know, it was through spiritual inspiration. It was written by a human. So I think that human wasn't there. Of course, spiritual inspiration can kind of help extrapolate things that human wasn't able to see or feel in the time period. But I think there's more of a story to kind of help explain where humans come from and kind of teach morality and get like a nice basis for the foundation of our religion, but not necessarily verbatim of what happened or what was said or done.
Okay. And a follow-up to this really quick. We asked you this question because a lot of people believe that the story of Adam and Eve actually has to do with like mitosis and the cell, because you know Adam came from God and then Eve came from Adam.
Okay.
So it's like a lot of people believe what it has to do with that. And so, what's your opinion on that?
Well, evolution obviously kind of tells a story that single-cell organisms divided and became more complex organisms, and that took billions of years. And if you think about how humans have changed just in a short amount of time, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, the height of people has changed, the facial structure of people has changed. And if you think about millions or even billions of years, that's an unfathomable amount of time. And so a great amount of changes can take place. So, I mean, that's something that, is possible. I'm not going to say it's the truth because I don't know, I wasn't there. But I think that's what science is gradually saying and compiling evidence for. So, I mean, I think it's a natural conclusion if science can back it up with sound facts and evidence.
All right, thank you, Mr. West.
Appreciate your time.
Do you believe that science and religion work in unison?
Yes, I believe scientists, the humanity can understand God as the creator of all things, and science is humanity's trying to explain how this creation, how this miracle of life actually happens. I mean, and whether it's the Big Bang or anything, I think in the end we still don't know how it happens. We can explain different parts of it, but not the whole. So I think they do work together. Yeah.
Okay. Why should scientists care about religion? Like, why should they incorporate it into their work, into their studies?
To force a scientist to incorporate religion, that sounds wrong. Okay, I think I believe that humans are always facing that question as to where do we come from, how was I made. We're always seeking that greater good and that greater knowledge. And as Catholic, Christian, religious, we believe that greater source of being is what we call God. And we understand him as God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm. And how do you believe the world came to be?
I believe that, and again, being a Christian, Catholic, religious, I believe that that there was this being that, and as it says in the book of Genesis, that there was a great abyss and a darkness, and this being was already there, and this being was pure love. And since love could not be by itself, because love is not about loving myself, it's about loving others, and it wants to grow, this being created something to love even more as itself, as himself. So, the Big Bang Theory sounds like a good theory, but it is a theory. We have no way of knowing the absolute truth.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's the Big Bang and when God decided, maybe that's when the Big Bang happened. Then we're all made of all those particles at the moment of implosion. That's feasible, very feasible.
Mm-hmm.
Evolution, we don't know when man came to consciousness. They're all theories, and none of them are absolute, but they're feasible. And I think God really, 1,000 years to God, a day to is like a day. 1,000 years to us is like a day to God. So whether it took 15 billion years or it happened all of a sudden 10,000 years ago, in the end is who made us and why did he make us?
And last question, do you think that the story of Adam and Eve has a scientific meaning behind it, or do you think it's just a theological story?
I think it's a mythical story. It's not scientific. It's myth that it tends to explain, it's humans trying to explain how we became so engulfed in war and sin, and it's sort of explaining human nature with Adam and Eve. We have everything we need in this creation. God has given us everything. There really is enough food and water in the world for every living being. But some decide to abuse the power, and so there is not enough. So the story of Adam and Eve is God gave us, as long as we're in a relationship with God, we understand good and evil. But once we start defining what is good to ourselves and say, well, maybe it's not so bad to do this, that's the fruit of the tree. So it's trying to explain how we came to be where we are. Because the way in society today, everybody's right. It's all relative. And that's what Adam and Eve, that's what the original sin really is saying. Is like, it's right to do this, and it's good because I like this, and it's good for me. And we can twist things around in our head. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's the tree that God said, do not eat of this tree. Because the knowledge of good and evil means we humans can decide what's good and what's evil. But the only thing that's good, as we understand as Christians, is God.
St. Thomas Aquinas wrote his Summa Theologica between AD 1265 and AD 1274. In his Summa Theologica, he addresses questions that both believers and non-believers have about God's existence. He has 5 proofs for God's existence. The first one is the argument from motion. This argument states that an object in motion must have been moved by an unbalanced force. So therefore, there must have been a first mover that caused this chain of reaction that created the world. This first mover is God. This argument also compares to Newton's first law of motion, which states that an object in rest will remain at rest until acted on by an unbalanced force. His second argument is argument from efficient cause. Nothing can create itself out of nothing. Something must have a cause for something to exist. Without God being the first cause, there would be nothing. Then his third argument is the argument from necessary being. Nothing can come from nothing. This means that something must exist at all times, and that is God. His fourth argument is argument from gradation. The great chain of being. There is always a measure of different degrees of goodness. Therefore, there must be a being of the highest form of good. God is a perfect being. Then his last argument is argument from design. Divine intelligence must come from a divine designer in order to explain all the complexity of the universe. Every particular arrangement of things with a specific goal and purpose was set there by God.
Science can be defined as a person's attempt to gain an understanding of the natural world. It is focused on facts and evidence. According to St. John of Cross, faith is supernatural means to achieve union of the understanding of God. Therefore, faith cannot be proven through facts and evidence. However, science and faith both search to understand the world. Science answers the questions of how, and faith answers the questions of why. Different people have different interpretations, but that is only natural. It is absurd to completely ignore our spiritual nature, just as it is absurd to stop searching for answers through science.